The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, recorded, edited and narrated by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 146, in which we will be looking at the last third of season 2, episode 8 of the TV series, and episode 21 of the series overall, Winter on Watership Down episode 1. We will also be looking at the first third of season 2, episode 9 of the TV series, and episode 22 of the series overall, Winter on Watership Down episode 2. I explained why we're doing this in last week's episode, so I won't bore you with it again. I have all new things to bore you with this week. I'm still showcasing Watership Down themed art, details in the notes. Please let me know if you'd like your Watership Down themed art to appear as the podcast title image for an episode, with full credit given. So then, in a little while we will continue with our Frithmas story. First though, a modest proposal. Frithmas, or the Festival of Frith. I'm about to make a case for something which I'll do in a few stages as each builds on the last. So strap in and prepare yourselves as we go down a festive rabbit hole. Have I mixed enough metaphors there? In the United Kingdom, where I live, at the beginning of winter, we remember the dead of 2 world wars each year via the poppy appeal, which reflects the poppies that still bloomed in amongst the horror of the trenches of World War I. This means that those who donate to the Royal British Legion's poppy appeal wear symbolic red poppies at that time of year. This began in 1921. The poppy is also used as a symbol of remembrance in other nations in the Commonwealth of Nations due to their former association with the British Empire. In 1933, the Cooperative Women's Guild began the tradition of wearing white poppies, a pacifist alternative to the red poppy that is now maintained by the Peace Pledge Union. The relationship between these two poppies is an ongoing, often controversial and complex one that I will not go into here. Suffice to say that I have been known to wear both side by side, as do many others in this country. Why do I mention this, you may well ask? Here's why. In 2006, the charity Animal Aid created the purple poppy as the third version designed to commemorate animals who serve in war, as they have been largely forgotten. For further details, please read Michael Morpurgo's excellent book Warhorse, or watch the incredible stage play and film it inspired. At this point, I also cannot help mentioning Richard Adams' 1988 novel Traveller, which is also about a horse in wartime. Once again, why do I mention this, you may well ask? So let me take you one further level down the rabbit hole of my reasoning. I hope you'll find it worthwhile, mainly because I ultimately hope to persuade you to part with some money or food that will help animals. Don't worry, this isn't a Christmas appeal, as such. In 1997 and 1998, here in the UK, the administration of our second largest city, Birmingham City Council, came up with a really good idea to celebrate this time of year in a multicultural city where many different festivals coincided between the end of October and the end of December. This included Halloween, Guy Fawkes Night, Diwali, Ramadan, Eid, Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year and the Chinese New Year. If you add into this mix the US notion of wishing one another happy holidays at this time of year, this mix could also include Thanksgiving and Kwanzaa, a celebration of African American culture. And, as someone who has been into alternative spirituality in my past, I would very much want to throw the Northern Hemisphere's Samhain and winter solstice into this mix. The basic idea was one of inclusivity, and I think it was a very worthy one. The concept of keeping winter lights up to mark all of these festivals was named Winterval, short for Winter Festival. Unfortunately, and all too predictably, this was labelled by elements of our press as part of the entirely non-existent War on Christmas, as if Winterval was supposed to replace Christmas in order to avoid offending those of other religions. This was an utter nonsense. Unfortunately, it was believed by far too many people. So, before I go any further, can I, as a humanist, take this opportunity to wish those of you who celebrate it, as I do in a secular way, a very Merry Christmas. Christmas Day for us is a truly special day that we spend with our grandchildren, giving gifts around the Christmas tree with our wonderful mixed heritage family, none of whom are or have ever been Christians. It is a cultural celebration and part of our nation's identity, as it is in many other nations, of course, and long may it remain so, regardless as to why it is celebrated. In temperate areas of the Northern Hemisphere, it brings joy and comfort at an otherwise cold, dark, and frankly depressing time of year. So, for a third time, why do I mention all of this? Well, remember that purple poppy I mentioned? The one that was established to honour animals a century after the one that was established to honour humans? And now think of Winterval. Is there room for just one more small celebration at this crowded time of year in the Northern Hemisphere? In last week's episode, Pipkin gave us a clue as to when Frith's Eve is celebrated, when he says the days will get longer now. Of course, the difference isn't noticed for a few days after the actual solstice, oddly enough around Christmas Day. So, let's assume that rabbits in the world of Watership Down somehow know when the winter solstice is, and that Frith's Eve falls on the winter solstice. That would be in December in the Northern Hemisphere and June in the Southern Hemisphere. This would make the festival of Frith, or Frithmas, and I and others like to call it, the day after the winter solstice. This year, 2023, that means that Frith's Eve is on the 22nd of December and Frithmas on the 23rd of December. Could this become an occasion when we think of animals struggling at this time of year, when food is hard to come by, as the rabbits of Watership Down do in the story we are currently telling? Could this longest night become an occasion for putting out food for wildlife, or donating to an animal shelter or any other charity helping animals? That way the fruits of such gifts could start to be enjoyed on Frithmas itself the following day. And of course, Frithmas could also be a day for giving gifts to our animal companions, or pets if you prefer, away from the, for them, often stressful chaos of Christmas Day. It could also be a chance to remind ourselves at this time of year that animals should get presents, not be presents. I'm not saying this will make a huge difference to wild animals who are struggling at this time of year. The actual coldest time of year where I live tends to fall more at the end of January, some 6 weeks later. But a small celebration such as this, where we take just a little time to focus on our non-human companions on this planet before turning to friends and family at Christmas, surely can only be a good thing. Is such an idea being inspired by an animation aimed at children a bit odd? Probably. But then again, how many festivals have an entirely sensible origin? And if one wished to mark Frithmas in a visible way in one's home, sticking a symbolic sprig of holly to a wall, as Pipkin did in the honeycomb in last week's episode, would seem a simple way of doing this, to symbolise Frith's promise to return and warm the earth again. After all, it would hardly look out of place at this time of year, would it? But you'd know. Insert smiley face here. Because those quiet celebrations that take place out of the limelight, but that mean something for those who take part in them, can come to mean a loss in a world where we could always do with a bit more quiet kindness. An act of compassion that no one ever knows about except for those who carry it out can be a very satisfying thing. The gifts that you give on Frith's Eve will never receive thanks, because that is a human concept, and not expecting a thank you for such gifts is what Frithmas should be all about. Anyway, here endeth the sermon. So, let's get back to the raiding party from Watership Down, who need to find a warmer place for Bigwig after his fall through the ice. They also need to find some flayrah for the Feast of Frith, as they approach a stately home where the lights are on. TV series Season 2, Episodes 8 and 9, Winter on Watership Down, and Frithmas Special Episode 2. The 21st and 22nd episodes of the Watership Down TV series were first broadcast in the UK on the 21st and 28th of September 2000. They were written by Mary Crawford and Alan Templeton. There will be a link to the episodes in the notes. This episode of the podcast covers the last 8 minutes of episode 21 and the first 8 minutes of episode 22. As episode 21 continues, we are back among the clouds with Kihar as he fulfills his promise to Hazel to fly above them so he can see which direction they need to go in to get back to Watership Down. Kihar emerges above the clouds on a moonlit night and spots the Ice Star and the Big Water Star. He now knows exactly which way to go, as the music from Cerys Matthews' Thank You Stars plays, which we have not heard since episode 9 of season 1. He joyfully cries out, "Thank you, stars," and dives back below the clouds to tell his rabbit companions. Meanwhile, the raiding party from Watership Down have reached the stately home, or mansion, that they were heading for when we left them last week. Fiver says that the warm lights of the house are like the stars have come down from the sky. "Let's see if they are warm," suggests Hazel. They all make for the mansion. Meanwhile, nearby, Kihara arrives back at the tree they had been sheltering under. Finding them gone, he spots some tracks heading towards another tree. And under that tree, glaring at him aggressively, is the fox. It suddenly makes for Kihara, and he only just takes off in time as it makes a leap for him, landing with a mouthful of his tail feathers. Kihara shouts his curses from the sky and says he will find his friends. The fox licks its lips and looks in the direction of the mansion. Back in the honeycomb on Watership Down, Hannah the mouse is entertaining members of the local wildlife with her accounts of living with rabbits. Pipkin is surprised by a bat spreading its wings. This causes him to dislodge a pile of acorns that Holly promptly trips up on. Blackberry and Primrose talk about how crowded it is. How will Hazel and his companions bring back enough food? Primrose says they should be back by now. Pipkin excitedly comes up to tell them about his new friend, Flitter the bat. Will the raiding party bring back some bugs for them? Blackberry reassures Primrose they will come back safe. Outside, a cold, snowy wind blows. On the subject of Blackberry, have you noticed how this important rabbit being made female in this series has resulted in her being marginalised in stories such as this one? So, having made the decision to slightly redress the gender balance, the character who is made female is then made less significant. So what was the point? The raiding party have reached the mansion. They reach the top of some stone steps. Hazel approaches the stars they saw earlier, which hang in a string from one of the window frames, and sniffs one of them. Despite Fiver's warning look, he taps it with his paw. It makes a clinking sound to his delight. The other rabbits smile as well. They look through the window to see a table laden with food and a blazing fireplace. There is also an entire pine tree in the room. We see human children shaking decorated boxes under the tree, which is covered in decorations and lights. They wonder what it all means. Hawkbit comments that if you want to look at a tree, you should go into the woods. Behind them, they hear a voice say hello. A doe introduces herself as Buttercup. She is voiced by comedian Dawn French, who played the Vicar of Dibley on UK TV. Hazel introduces them. Buttercup, looking in particular at Bigwig, says they look cold. She adds that it is Frith's Eve. Every rabbit should be in a warm burrow. She invites them to join her. Hazel says their luck may have turned for the better. Hawkbit adds it couldn't get much worse. Bigwig says it very much could, and not to tempt the Black Rabbit of Inlay. As the humans in the mansion sing about holly and ivy, the rabbits pass one of the windows, their shadows cast by the warm light from within. Bigwig is feeling the cold again. As the rabbits round the mansion, Kihar flying overhead just misses them. He is beginning to despair in his search for his friends. Buttercup makes for a strange hedge that has a decorated pine tree at its centre. We see that it is a maze. As they join her, Hazel says it seems a funny place. Buttercup says it must seem that way, and to stay close as it's easy to get lost in the maze. Fiver asks what a maze is. Buttercup answers in a functional way. A maze is a place that is easy to get lost in. Just as they are about to enter the maze, Hazel spots Kihar and calls out to him, but he can't hear. Dandelion asks how they will find their way home without him. Buttercup asks who they were calling to. A friend is the answer. One that they may never see again, adds Hawkbit sadly. Kihar is now in despair as he reaches the edge of the estate again. He lands badly on the wall, ending up on his back, and cries. He is now convinced that he has lost his friends to the fox and heads back to Watership Down to break the bad news to the others there. And that is the somewhat downbeat ending of episode 21, the first episode of Winter on Watership Down. Episode 22, the second and last part of the story, opens with a musical flourish as we see the mansion again. The rabbits from Watership Down reach the centre of the maze with Buttercup. There we see close up the decorated outdoor Christmas tree that is at the centre of the maze, surrounded by small round bushes. As Buttercup heads towards the tree, Fiver says to Hazel he's not sure he likes this place. It feels unnatural. Hazel agrees. However, Bigwig is still suffering. They need to get him somewhere warm. Buttercup emerges again and asks if they prefer the cold. Clearly not. They follow her through the bushes to the base of the Christmas tree where the entrance to her warren lies. Under a tree decorated by humans. At the centre of a maze created by humans. The warren is spacious and welcoming, festooned with winter greenery for the feast of Frith. Bigwig looks at a sprig of holly with affection, which goes out of focus, and says he might lie down for a while to Hazel, who collides with him gently for some reason. Buttercup shows Bigwig to a bed of hay and he lies down. Hazel orders Hawkbit and Dandelion to huddle with him to keep him warm. Hawkbit comments how cold Bigwig is. Buttercup asks what happened and is briefly told. She wonders how they come to be wandering in the grounds of the mansion. When they explain about their failed raid and getting lost, she shows them to a large underground pile of flayrah and tells them they can take all they need. No one should go hungry on Frith's Eve. Is all this reminding you of a certain other warren? We are now back with Keehaw as he approaches Watership Down on a beautiful moonlit winter night. After another clumsy snow landing, he makes his way underground. The warren seems empty. In the honeycomb, some of the guests are still hanging around. Pipkins tells Primrose and Blackberry that the squirrels would like to know when the feast begins. He has noticed that the raiding party aren't back yet. He asks if they are all right. That is when we hear Keehaw crying as he enters the honeycomb. He tells them what happened. That a fox got everyone while he was looking for the way back. Primrose looks horrified. Pipkin begins crying, but then his sadness is replaced by anger. He says they will come back. It is Frith's Eve. They have to come home. The camera shot moves to a sprig of holly. And now we are looking at another sprig of holly that Fiver is looking at sadly. He asks Bigwig if he is okay. Bigwig is chewing a carrot and looking his old self. He said it is lucky they found this place. Fiver looks around him. He clearly isn't so sure. Meanwhile, Buttercup says to Hazel that they didn't expect company, so it might be an idea to fetch some more flayrah. Dandelion wonders why she is saying this as if it will be easy. Buttercup replies there is plenty more. Would they like to help? Hazel, Dandelion and Hawkbit go to help, Hazel letting Bigwig know what they are doing. But Bigwig says that Fiver has the tingles. He's looking around him unhappily and shivering. He knows this feeling might just be because they are so close to humans, but there is definitely danger here. Then suddenly he has a vision. Straight path too close. Dart, rabbit, dart. A little springs from where you start. Hazel promises to be careful. Bigwig asks him if he is having second thoughts about Buttercup. Hazel replies that he's wondering if these rabbits aren't a little too good to be true. They emerge above ground into the maze and cautiously follow Buttercup, who tells them that in the maze they are safe from a Lil. Man made it. This does not reassure Hazel, Dandelion and Hawkbit. Buttercup promises them there is nothing to be afraid of. Hawkbit says to Hazel he is liking this less and less. Hazel agrees. They emerge from the other side of the maze to see a bare, twisted winter tree. All around its base is a huge amount of flayrah left by humans in cooking pots and strewn on the ground. There is even food suspended in the branches of the tree. Buttercup goes right up to the tree and encourages them to start collecting food. She says this is all they can eat and they can take what they want. She rolls a turnip towards Hazel. He looks angry. Hawkbit joins him, sniffing the turnip suspiciously. They realise that they have got themselves involved in another warren of the snares. And then Hazel looks on in shock as a large creature emerges from behind the tree, looming over Buttercup. And so ends part 2, on a cliffhanger. Is it canon? Tales from Watership Down, published in 1996, 4 years before Winter on Watership Down was first broadcast, features a story of the return of Elachera and Rabscuttle from their encounter with the Black Rabbit of Inlay, in which they are enticed into a maze by a dishonest rabbit called Greenweed. This is the first story of Section 2, Chapter 8 of the book overall, the story of the comical field. We covered it in episode 104 of this podcast, which I urge you to listen to after the Frithmas special is complete, if you want to avoid spoilers. In that story, the big house next to the maze is derelict, and the evil creature that dwells in the maze is supplied with fresh rabbit victims by Greenweed in exchange for protection. In episode 104, Liam Michaela also referenced another possible influence on this story, Robert Lawson's Rabbit Hill books, the second of which is called The Tough Winter, and apparently features a proto-Feast of Frith. Now, while I do not think for one moment that these episodes were made with those who had read Tales from Watership Down or Rabbit Hill in mind, there did seem to be some really interesting use of other material at times to inspire the plots of this series, which is, remember, the largest expansion of Watership Down-based storytelling on film. So, canon? Well, as I predefined the Watership Down canon as being the original novel and the 1978 film, no. However, had I included Tales in the canon, and many of you probably think I should have, then this story's apparent tribute to the story of the comical field would be in the same area as the Great Game episode, with its tribute to the trial of Elachera. So, not canon, but in a very interesting way. Next time, the rabbits of Watership Down discover the true nature of this strange and unnatural place.